After Japanese businessman Hiroshi Nishiyama was sentenced to 12 years in prison by the Chinese Communist Party, it shocked public opinion, shocking Japanese authorities and business circles. U.S. Ambassador to Japan Rahm Emanuel said the incident caused Japanese companies to accelerate their withdrawal from China. Looking back from the past, we see that not only are foreign businessmen arrested and convicted in China, all foreigners are within the scope of being used by the Chinese government, depending on the purpose. In March this year, using the excuse of suspicion of espionage activities, the CCP temporarily detained the CEO of Astellas Pharma Incorporated of Japan, Mr. Nishiyama. In October officially arrested him. Mr. Nishiyama Kwan was sentenced to 12 years in prison, and the sentence was upheld in the final judgment. On the morning of November 13, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Matsuno Hirokazu said the Japanese government would make every effort to rescue Mr. Nishiyama, and also said it would continue to call on the CCP to improve the transparency of judicial procedures. Reuters quoted a number of Tokyo officials pointing out that Nishiyama's arrest had a significant impact on businesses, causing Japanese investment in China to fall to its lowest level since 2014, thereby accelerating the trend of leaving China. U.S. Ambassador to Japan Rahm Emanuel said in an interview with Reuters that the incident had a huge impact. "I know Japanese companies are reconsidering. It is now impossible for Japanese companies to send people to work in Chinese companies, out of concern for their safety." The Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that 5 Japanese citizens are currently detained in China. Since 2015, when the CCP's counterintelligence law took effect, there have been a total of 17 Japanese people detained by the CCP. Mr. Nishiyama's sentence is symbolic. Mr. Nishiyama's arrest shocked Japanese society, because the CCP was promoting large-scale repression for national security reasons, and Mr. Nishiyama himself was relatively famous. He spoke fluent Chinese, and was also a board member of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce in China. Over the years, he has attended many high-level events with officials from both countries. Many Japanese officials said that the issue of Mr. Nishiyama's arrest was symbolic because of his status. Since his detention, questions from Japanese businessmen about whether it is safe to travel to China have increased significantly, while some Japanese companies in China have required employees to live discreetly and not be too ostentatious in sales and other activities. A recent survey of Japanese companies doing business in China found that half of respondents said they would cut investment this year. According to a poll released by the Japan Chamber of Commerce in China last month, only 10% of 8,300 Japanese companies said they would increase investment. Reasons given by respondents included sluggish demand, cross-border monitoring issues, and concerns about investment risks in China. On April 1, Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa arrived in China, the purpose of which was to urgently resolve the arrest of employees of Astellas Pharmaceutical Company by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Although the CCP claims that Astellas employees were arrested on suspicion of being spies, whether that is really the case remains to be discussed. After all, the two crimes of endangering national security and espionage have always been familiar tools of the CCP, which can be used to arrest anyone at any time, despite the investigation and interrogation process being completely vague. Furthermore, on December 1, 2018, Chinese Vice President of Huawei Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Vancouver, Canada for extradition to the U.S. for trial. Not long after that, Canadian citizens in China, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, were consecutively arrested by Chinese authorities on charges of spying for foreign countries, that is, the pocket crime mentioned above. Although Kovrig and Spavor have always denied their guilt and there is indeed no subsequent evidence linking them to the alleged crime, the CCP still firmly views the two hostages as a threat, and finally forcing Canada to release Ms. Meng Wanzhou, completing hostage diplomacy. The two Canadians were not involved in the Meng Wanzhou case, but because of the CCP's needs, they were dragged into it. Among them, one of the Canadians has been convicted and is in criminal detention. The arrest of a convicted person stunned Westerners, but when that person was released, it was even more bizarre. The CCP Foreign Ministry stated that the release of the two people had nothing to do with the Meng Wanzhou case. In China, the legal system is also complete and the process is complete. The main problem is that there is a divergence in the law enforcement stage. Interpreting the law and maintaining the law depends on interests. The legal documents are completely complete when arresting and releasing people. There are legal procedures. The release of a person must also have a legal process, reaching a conclusion as to whether the sentence is wrongful or severely punished. If there is a health problem, a hospital certificate is required. The Chinese government's practice of arresting and releasing only proves that the CCP is a rogue government. Sophie Richardson, China Director of Human Rights Watch, HRW, told the ARD television network in Germany that this shows that the Chinese leadership is prepared to take any innocent person, act as a bargaining chip to get what they want from another country. This is worrying. Mr. Husakos noted that China's judicial system is not independent and does not adjudicate cases based on the rule of law, making it seemingly impossible for the two Canadians to receive a fair trial. When it comes to detaining foreigners and Chinese people themselves, anyone in China that the regime and the Communist Party wants to detain, they will be detained, secretly tried, detained without notice, due process. This is a regime that is really worse than any criminal organization or any kind of nefarious dictatorship that we have seen in a very long time, he said. There is no limit to what they will not do to achieve their goals. Less than 4 months after China reopened to the world after 3 years of a COVID-free policy, many foreign businessmen are once again hesitant to travel to Beijing and Shanghai. Some companies even encourage the families of foreign employees to return home. This is especially the case with the Japanese and, to a lesser extent, the Americans. The reason has to do with a recent increase in raids on foreign companies and even arrests of Chinese and foreigners accused of espionage. The Financial Times revealed that Shanghai police recently conducted a surprise raid on the offices of Bain & Company, a leading American management consulting firm, and seized computers and phones. Mobile. No Bain employees were arrested. On March 20th, Mintz Group employees in Beijing were not so lucky. 5 employees, all Chinese, working in Beijing for the American corporate investigation firm were arrested. In early March, a Japanese man working for Astellas Pharma's Chinese subsidiary was arrested for what was later reported to be espionage. Japanese diplomats in Beijing have not had access to any information about him. According to Japanese press, at least 17 Japanese citizens have been arrested in China for espionage since 2015. It was also reported that in February 2022, Dong Yuyu, a Chinese journalist known for his liberal leanings, was arrested after having lunch with a Japanese diplomat. His family just made the case public because Dong is about to be tried. He faces up to 10 years in prison for espionage. His Japanese interlocutor was interrogated for several hours in defiance of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. According to our information, 4 diplomats working for a Western embassy were recently detained for questioning for several hours while traveling in the west of the country. Western officials and experts acknowledge that the United States has engaged with China for decades under the assumption that the country's economic liberalization would lead to greater political freedoms. However, this prediction did not come true, and even the human rights situation in this country is getting worse. Washington began shifting to a tough approach toward the CCP regime under the Trump administration. The Chinese government's international activities are simply that of a terrorist and rogue government. Absolutely no convention at all. Although terrorist organizations in the Middle East as well as around the world are terrifying to people and organizations, these terrorist organizations have never dared to show anything before China. These terrorist organizations make very loud calls for righteousness, martyrdom, but are completely silent in front of China. Even when China brutally oppresses the Uyghurs, that is, their Muslim brothers, they do not dare to say a word. Of course, you never hear a news story in the media that there was a suicide bombing in China by some Muslim organization. For a very simple reason, terrorists are also afraid of terrorism and CCP is a terrorist boss. Hollywood is very famous for superhero movies, super spies, super inspectors, and characters full of personality. But it all has nothing to do with China. Perhaps those superheroes for justice also have to cover their mouths, ears, and eyes from the events in China. There are many reasons for this, but a key reason is that the Chinese government has used benefits to distort the justice that those superheroes pursue. For a foreigner who comes to China for all different purposes, your problem with the Chinese government is an unknown problem. There are a few factors to consider when you are in China. The first is your country of citizenship. This is especially important and determines the outcome if something happens. If you are in European and North American countries, your safety is relatively high. If you are a government employee, even better. But if you are truly an intelligence agent, the results are not necessarily safe. There was an incident where a foreign spy was shot dead in a crowded place in China. This is an activity within the hidden rules of intelligence and counterintelligence activities. And even if you're in a US consulate or embassy, it's not necessarily safe. In 2012, Bo Xilai, who is currently in prison on corruption charges, once sent armored vehicles and soldiers to surround the US consulate, along with snipers, to kill Wang Lijun hiding there. With nationalities in other countries, you can only rely on your luck. Once you have been arrested by Chinese government agents, you are completely innocent. There are a few certain things for your reference. 1. You have been chosen by them and they already know your basic information. 2. You are not the focus of the matter, you are just a hostage and benefit for the Chinese government to exchange. 3. It doesn't matter whether you agree to plead guilty or not, and it's best if you don't agree to sign any documents they provide and only talk when provided with a lawyer and contacts in your country. Friend. We fully support your trip to China to learn about the culture and expand your horizons. At the same time, to experience George Orwell's work in real life, but with the crime magnified 10,000 times.
Don't forget to comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from Understand China, and thank you for tuning in.